And we are live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How is everyone doing? Welcome to the show today where we're just going to have some light talk about things that are happening around the world. But most importantly, there was this conversation that came up last week or this week very recently about how British people, the original British people, were black people. And it was even extended to the claim that the gigantic Stonehenge structure was actually built by black people. I was like, this sounds interesting. And I think they've even made some children's history books making that assertion in Britain, and it's been shared around. It's been passed around. Such kind of message has been passed around. So I just wanted to have a conversation about that. There are a lot of sort of wild statements, wild observations, wild things that come up every now and then, and you just look at yourself and say, "Wow, this world is really dumb. How can we be simultaneously so advanced and so dumb at the same time? How can the world be simultaneously advanced and people are making certain wild claims without any basis?" Um, but before I get right into that conversation, right? Again, into that conversation, let me just talk about some other things that's of interest to me, of notes to me this last week. And it's going to be the two favorite Indians in America right now, Kamala Harris and Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah, so it seems as if how will I call it? It seems as if the Indians are not putting in their best forward. They're not putting in their best candidates. I don't know. There's something about this those two people that's just so cringe. I mean, Kamala Harris and Vivek. Something about them is just so cringe. Whenever I see Kamala Harris with her cackling voice and I'm like, ew. And then I see Vivek on stage with this very fake plastered smile, just wrapping up things like ChatGTP. I'm like, "Ugh, this is cringe, man. This is cringe." So Kamala Harris was claiming the other day that young people are not many young people are complaining to her that one of the reasons or the reason why they do not want to have a family is because of climate change or because of the climate emergency, the climate catastrophe. So they are worried for the kind of future that their children will have. I know we talked about climate change last week, right? But it seems very odd to me that it doesn't occur to her that probably the reasons why young people are complaining about not wanting to have families is because the economy is bad. There's a worsening economy. People can't even take care of themselves. Not to think of having a family. People can't feed themselves properly. People can't buy gas. People can't do a whole lot of things. No, 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 that's not the problem. It's because they are somehow concerned about a future that they don't know about. They're somehow concerned about some climate catastrophe. I don't know how many young people she's talked to, right? And but if I have the sense that if you talk to many young people, uh, part of their burning questions or part of their burning concerns will not be climate change. It will probably be the fact that the economy is so bad and they don't even see a path forward. They don't see how they can make, raise a family with a tightening and worsening economic situation. That would be my sense, right? Then over to Vivek, right? Well, I don't I don't know if YouTube is going to strike my channel again because the last time I posted something about Kamala Harris, I got a strike, right? Obviously, you can't see anything about her. I just posted a clip that was not even edited by me. I just posted a clip of Kamala Harris and I got a message immediately that there was a community strike on my channel, and that's the strike that's going to be there if I get another one. So I probably be out of YouTube. But so it just shows that there's some people you can't talk about. So there's some people. So I won't be surprised if I wake up tomorrow and my channel is no more. But well, I gotta do what I gotta do. Back to Vivek. You remember the other time where Vivek was saying he was trying to bring in some citizenship tests for people to become, or some sort of tests, some sort of test for people to be eligible to vote in America and all that. But it turns out that his father is not even American. Turns out that when he was born, when his mother was not even American then. So when he goes on about trying to change certain things, right? Things that he clearly benefited from, but now he wants to just change it. He wants to just change it for everybody. Someone called him Chat GTP, and I think it's a very accurate description of Vivek, because he just rapid fire says some very, very, very insane, wild things, right? And it just wraps them out. It takes the conservative talking point and then just adds a layer of stupidity to it, and somehow he's he's up there on the stage. But that's the nature of politics for you, right? People, politicians are usually, they are actors, if I would say, almost like they're paid actors. They're just coming there to put on a show. I mean, that's part of the reason why Trump is so popular, because he has this charisma. Most of the time, it has nothing to even do with policy positions, but just because the person has a certain charisma, yeah, you know, people want to see what they're selling. They're not selling policy proposals, they're selling themselves. It's all showmanship. So the politician who is not, who doesn't have that swagger, who doesn't have that charismatic persona, who can't sell bullshit, is not going to go anywhere. Who is just, who is just focused on, what the policies are, he's not going to go anywhere. That's the realities of politics. Anyway, let's get to the conversation for today. Let's get to the meat of the conversation for today, right? Which is the claim that Stonehenge was built by Black people. You know, this idea that history and things that happen in history have to be rewritten, because I think people overcorrect to an extent where they become ridiculous. People are trying to like say, oh, Black people were great or Black people are great. Yeah, Black people are great, Black people are great, whatever, right? But when you want to support such assertions with ridiculousness, or you want to support it with lies or fabricated history, it defeats your point. It defeats the message that you're trying to pass across. It just defeats the point that you are trying to make, right? So Stonehenge was built about 5,000 years ago, right? About 5,000 years ago. And you ask yourself, who were the people in Britain at that time? Of course, it was the British people. And I know, yes, there have been successive waves of migrations and all that, but somehow people there, or currently now in Britain, would be related to the original inhabitants of Britain. Somehow, the gene pool would somehow have persisted when the Danes came, when the Romans came, and what have you, right? I think it will still persist, right? So all this draws from the new revelations from the Cheddar Man, which is known to be the oldest known fossil records of man excavated in Britain, who was found to, um, from the analysis that they carried out, they saw that he probably had dark skin, he probably had black skin. And that was, hi Stanley, how are you doing? And that was the assertion on which people are now saying, oh, the original Britons were black people, right? The originals. Well, when you say the original Britons were black people, what exactly do you mean? Do you mean to say that they are black people in the sense of the kind of black people we have today? Do you mean to say that they are black people in the sense that they are more related to the black people we have today, or the Africans we have today, than they are to British people today? What exactly is going on there, right? If you say they are black people, they're people of, obviously they're people of course, people built Stonehenge, right? But then there are other characteristics that this cheddar man has that are not typical African features. For example, he's supposed to have blue-green eyes. That's not a typical African feature, right? He's supposed to have straight hair. That's not a typical African feature. So if the claim is that the people who were in Britain 5,000, 10,000 years ago were black people, right? If the claim is they were black people, they clearly had other features that were not typically black or typically African. So where the argument doesn't correlate for me, right? Human populations, the dynamics of quote and unquote evolution, or what I would call adaptation, is what I would call adaptation is not straight. I really don't believe in the theory of evolution, but that's topic for another conversation. But let's say I do believe in it. Let's say I buy into the theory. I think that people take on characteristics, they adapt to their local environment. And yes, it's been shown that lighter skin is an adaptation to living in a much more colder environment where you don't need as much melanin because you need to absorb vitamin D from the sun. So it could very well be that the earliest people who inherited Britain were darker skinned people. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were black people, right? It, it doesn't. Oh, Stanley is saying no, race wasn't a thing back then. Yeah, of course, race wasn't a thing back then, but people are making it about, um, you know, race now, making it about, oh, black people built Stonehenge, black people did this, black people were great. So now let's suppose that's true, that those people who built Stonehenge are more related to the Africans or the black people of today. You got to ask yourself, um, does it mean that the white man is a much more evolved form from the original people who got to Britain or Europe at that time, the original black people who got to Europe at that time, and then the other humans who remained in Africa just stayed that way? Does it mean does it mean that? I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, right? I don't know. But anyhow, uh, Stanley says, lots of you said Cheddar Man had blue eyes and dark skin. Well, that's according to the report shown by the DNA analysis, show that he had probably had dark skin and blue green eyes and straight hair, right? And he was lactose intolerant. Yeah, those are the facts that came out. But somehow the claim is that you know, Stanley said black people built the pyramids. It's a much better assertion based on weather alone. Yeah, black people. I would agree to that one. There's better evidence for that than saying black people built Stonehenge, right? And even if the people who built Stonehenge were a darker skinned people, I don't think we can necessarily use the term black as as when you use the term black today, there's a specific connotation that comes to your mind, right? So I don't necessarily think that the term black would apply in that situation, right? Lots, if you say DNA cannot determine skin color, well, they did DNA analysis, and um, you say DNA cannot determine skin color. Why can't DNA determine skin color, right? I mean, the DNA um, codes for all the characteristics. It codes for all the features that the person has, right? So if they can determine, if they can look at this, they do a DNA analysis and be able to look for quote and unquote the genes that are responsible for skin color and all that stuff, right? They should be able to tell. Well, all those, to me, some of those things are just still scientific speculations, right? So much time has passed. The fossil is, what have you, is more than 10,000 years old and all that stuff. So you have to take all those things with some kind of, you have to take them with some kind of speculation, some scientific speculation, right? So back to the point I was making, right? There was a time someone told me on Twitter that the that most British men are descended from pharaohs in Egypt. I was like, oh boy, I was just laughing. And this is almost like the it's almost as ridiculous as that. This particular one is almost as ridiculous as that assertion, right? But people say wild things all the time. So um Lord should be saying, Stanley, not true. Climate change, it's getting hotter. So when you see climate, are you responding to Stanley's claim that it's cold and rainy in England? Say climate change is getting hotter. Yeah, of course, it's getting hotter. Doesn't mean that things will just change overnight, right? Europe is still much more colder than Africa. It's way, way colder than Africa. So even if such changes are going to happen, you don't expect to see it overnight. It's not something that will just happen overnight, right? I still think that most of the variabilities that you see in the human species is due to adaptations to local environments. I mean, even Africans that travel to Western countries, they tend to get a little bit lighter, right? Their skin tend to be lighter than when they were back here in Africa. So I think it does play, I think it does play some role, right? Mr. Mina says, I think every culture epitomizes the men in their culture as the best men who ever lived. Yeah, true. Every culture wants to highlight and say, oh, the men in my culture are the best that ever lived. Everybody will want to praise their own. Everybody wants to say theirs is the best, mine is the best, and mine is the best. It's the way of the world, but objective facts will determine what's the truth of that. And she says, I think that's healthy and important. So Stanley says, back in Stonehenge days, I'm talking about. So maybe you're responding to Lordship, right? I think it's healthy pride. So yeah, so that's basically it. This and the funny thing is that the person who came out with that history book teaching kids that Stonehenge was built by black people is actually Nigerian. I was like, damn, these Nigerians. Uh, Actually Nigerian, but it just seems a little bit ridiculous to me, right? Only to people who don't read history in America. I don't know what you guys are arguing on about, right? But let me open up the stream. Maybe we can talk about other fun stuff, right? Open up the stream to anyone that wants to call in. Most likely Stanley will call in and let's just talk. Let's just talk. What do you think about this theory that Stonehenge was built by black people? Do you think it has any weight? Do you think it's all fluff? Do you even believe that the so-called Cheddar Man was actually uh, that dark skinned, right? Do you think because it was time, events, populations, waves of populations. I know that the British Isles have been invaded by different people. I know that probably the original inhabitants of the British Isles, right? Maybe the most closely related to the Celtic people, right? Most likely related to the Celtic people, right? And then the the Germanic tribes, the Angles and the Saxons, the Jutes, they came, and then more Germanic tribes, the Norwegians, the Danes came, and then the Romans came, and then the how will I call it? So many, many, many people. And Mr. Mina says, I'm happy to be notified when Africans have cancer having a discussion. Yeah, happy to have you. It's a privilege to have you in our discussions as well. You should call in. You should call in one of these days, and just tell us your thoughts, right? Um, Templar says black people invented laptops. Of course, we did. Invented computers and everything. Invented everything inventable, right? Yeah, so you're right. Lord Sip says the black guy invented the telephone. Of course, you're right as well, right? White people didn't invent anything. So, back to what I was saying, right? Different waves of migrations have come into the continent of Europe and into the British Isles. So it is very, very possible that the original inhabitants, as man began to spread from Africa to other parts of the world, at least according to scientific theory, which to me, I don't think specifically that they said the oldest fossil was found in East Africa, so Africa was most likely the birthplace of man. Maybe it's my religious prejudice, but I do think somehow that it's the Middle East that's the birthplace of man, right? I think it was somewhere somewhere in probably North Africa and the Mediterranean regions. That's probably my religious side speaking, but I think it makes more sense that that could have been the the center of human civilization, from which humans spread into Europe, spread into North America, spread into Africa, and all manner of places. So Stanley, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. 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 Good.
Well,
So
you know. Well, no, go ahead, because you know with your point about the origin of of the genus Homo. I'm gonna make a joke.
let's hear the joke.
Well, no, I, if you say based on your religious beliefs, you think the origin of Homo sapiens, all that stuff is North Africa or the Middle East?
Yeah, I think so.
Based on what? I mean, not just religion, but there is almost no supporting evidence to that belief.
And that's why I said based on religion.
Okay, because my joke is okay. Well, black people made Stonehenge
Black
based
people.
based on that children's author, which is the other thing. It's a children's author. She's not a historian or a paleontologist or any of that stuff. So, I mean, a children's book author saying black people built Stonehenge has as much solid evidence as, you know, modern man originating in North Africa.
So where do you think modern man originated from? You buy the
You know
East Africa.
what? I am not qualified to say. I just have to go with the evidence that I read in
Mm,
textbooks and magazines.
mm,
Supposedly it's East Africa.
mm. So there was a burning question that occurred to me today, right? So scientists say, oh, there's just one species of man, right? Homo
No,
sapiens, right?
no, no, no,
In
no, no.
existence today.
But
I
you know
mean
what?
today.
That
I
is
mean today
no.
in
I see.
existence today.
Oh boy. Um, you know what?
Mm,
Um, that is a very interesting thing
mm.
because I wonder. I mean, we don't really know that.
So when you say we don't really know that, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, Homo sapiens intermarried with a lot of different other versions of Homo. Um, Neanderthalensis or whatever it was called. Um, I don't think at the time, you know,
No, no. What
Neanderthals
the
thought
point
they
I'm
were
driving
the
at.
only species of man. I mean, two versions of Homo can exist at the same time,
So
and they can intermarry.
the point I'm driving at is that currently scientists believe that all humans currently alive are descended are basically Homo sapiens. Yes,
And
they may have had interactions with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and some other hominid groups, but essentially we are of one race, which is interesting. If there were many other one species, if there were many other species of humans, how come? How it's very convenient that only one
and
species of humans survived till today,
totally,
somehow absorbing the others or the others getting extinct. It's very, very, very convenient, I think.
totally agree with your point here. How do we know?
Yeah.
It's a very to use the word, maybe not the right word, but a very prejudiced view. We won't know for 1,000 years.
Mm,
I mean, DNA. we have more sophisticated tools and all this stuff, but I will take that scientific, hypothesis and just go, okay. But I had my doubts.
Mm. So someone on Twitter was when I asked this question, someone on Twitter was responding like said if we use the same metrics in which we use in classifying species in animals, we might look at the various human so-called subgroups as different species, like the people from Asia, people from Europe, and the people from Africa are their own species who are just interbreedable. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I'm not qualified, but
Yeah.
my guess is that when we do human genome project and like
Mm.
99.8 or 7 or I don't think it was 99.9, but it's not very much variation.
Yeah, there's not very much variation, but if you also take check out the DNA, the genome of say our closest our closest relatives, that's the apes and the great apes, and it's not that much of a difference either. So we still share
But
close to 90.
exactly, and chimpanzees, again, I think they're 99.7.
Yeah.
So are we 8?
Well,
I mean, you can
according to
make
science.
you could actually go in the reverse.
Mm, mm,
That's why I tend to, you know, I think it's an interesting hypothesis, but I'm only going to do a grain of salt. I'm not qualified. I have to lead with that. I have no clue. I
mm,
suspect that we're wasting our time even thinking about it. There are bigger problems.
mm. So let's maybe talk a little about evolution and adaptation, and looking at Darwin and Darwin's finches in the Galapagos Islands, right?
Mhm.
What do you think happened there? Those finches that took on different big features, adapting to their local environment, right? Which for the
Mhm.
most parts were interbreedable. Did did you think what was going on there was speciation or just a varieties? Do you think those were the formations of new species of animals, or it was
I
just
don't. I
basically
mean, if you say new species, yeah, but you know, when you were a kid, when I was a kid, you always saw sort of a tree thing where the branches or limbs or whatever kind of growing off a common trunk. I tend to think of it that way. So, speciation is just another way of saying adaptation,
mm,
and the randomness. And see, that's the interesting thing. I mean, a lot of the a long-billed bird versus a short-billed bird, there were both at one point, and one was more successful than the other. Therefore, they outlasted or interbreeded. They outlasted. Short bills outlasted long bills, or vice versa.
but
So
but
it's not as simple as there was a change. Um, the change might have taken 10,000 years.
no, but when both exist simultaneously, you're having long
They
beaks
interbreed, and
and
the
short
and,
beaks.
and the short bills who are able to take care of their short billed children, but are unable to help their long billed children for whatever reason, um, the short billed children survive, and it could just be because the long bills are ugly, or well, no, no, no. I'm not making a joke. I'm saying maybe the short bill can't bird. We're talking birds can't get the right bug or the right food into the long-billed children for
But
whatever reason. It's
I think it's all scientific speculation. If I when I look at,
I
this theory of
well, I have to
evolution.
respect your view here. I understand where you're coming from. I just don't happen to. And oddly enough, do you know? And we'll talk offline about this, but there are religious people who kind of can accept evolution as a process. If we're going to talk God's will, well, God's plan is evolution.
So the extent to which I can accept evolution is in creating of varieties, not in the origin of the species themselves, right? So I
Hmm.
can accept that evolution occurred, causing the various human subgroups that we have today to have slightly different features, right? The
Hmm.
Africans are darker skinned, the Europeans are lighter skinned, right? They were
Hmm.
all descended from Adam at one point, and then as the descendants spread to other parts of the world, the evolutionary pressure caused different things to happen to these groups. Like I can
Hmm.
accept that from for animals too. I mean, let's take for example wolves and dogs, right? They're
Hmm.
basically the same, but they're technically not the same. But they can still interbreed, right? If you take a wolf and a dog,
Well, to a certain extent,
would still integrate properly. So in
but
that
but
sense,
it.
I think evolution is not it's not inelastic in the sense that it has its limit, right? I don't think it
Interesting.
I don't think it can create entirely new species. I think it can create lots of
Well,
varieties.
no, it doesn't create outright. But think about um, do you know what um, a zonkey, a zebra, and a donkey can interbreed,
Hmm.
but the offspring is sterile, so it
Yeah,
can't.
same as
So
it.
I mean that is literally the end of the line for that interaction.
But there's no proof that the
And there are
donkey and
tons of them.
the zebra were once one species. There's no proof that they were once one species.
Well, no, that's not my point. I'm talking about the way evolution works. Um, Not every intermingling of genes is successful enough to produce a long line of offspring.
Mm.
You're cut off, there will be no more. That's my point. Now we're talking like millennia. We're not talking, like goldfish.
Mm.
So I just tend to it, and it's kind of funny. And I'm gonna go off on a slight tangent, but it's actually rather funny that people who have, a faith-based idea of
Mm.
how, a faith-based idea of origin of species, if you want to call it that.
Mm.
If God is infinite, then He has time to, it could be a billion years, and there would be speciation.
Yeah.
It's limitless. And if you want to really put it in a religious way, well, you know what? Some experiments work, some don't. So why are we putting time limits?
So my problem with the theory of evolution is that it's to me it's all scientific speculation. It's it's extrapolation based on
Well, let me ask you a
very
question though. That's
very
an
very.
odd thing to say. There are models, even if they're mathematical or just short term.
Hmm.
Where's the where's and let me know if I'm going too far with this. I don't want to press my luck here, but where is God created woman and man? Where is that proof?
Well, the proof is that we are here.
No, the proof is we are here. This whole Cartesian thing. I think, therefore I am. I am, therefore I am. It's a circular argument.
So now the religious argument doesn't it
Well,
doesn't
it's
fall within the realm of scientific. You can't prove it by
yes,
scientific methods. So it's
agree.
I wouldn't even attempt to do that, right? But when we are looking at science itself, by the metric of science itself, the theory of evolution fails to account for how even species arise, right? Because
Okay.
let's take for example, we say time is what it needs to transition one species from to another species. In all of recorded history, I can
Yeah.
hear a sound. I can hear a sound. Yeah. So in all of recorded scientific history, there's never been a proven transition of the offspring of one species at any point in time that diverged, that became, totally different in terms of genetics, or totally different in terms of
Well, no, that's
neurodevelopment.
not true with genetics.
Oh, so give an example.
If you took a fish from the water,
Mm,
did a sequence, and compared it to a human genome, there's going to be like probably 90 to 95% of the
mm.
same genes. There's
Yeah.
much more. So tell me, and you finish your argument because I kind of cut you off, but I think
So
genetics is like a quiver in the scientific quiver. I'm sorry, an arrow in the scientific quiver.
so I can explain why there is so much similarity between,
Oh, okay.
um, between even as lowly as a fish and humans. Well, because they're
Mhm.
essentially made by, in my religious worldview, they're essentially made by the same person, right? They have similar biological processes, so it makes sense that you have a template, and then you just copy that template and tweak one or two things here and there, just like a computer program, right? If you have a
Right,
program,
but explain
if you
the
look at the
fish
code of
in
if you look at
person
the
can.
code if you look at the code of many computer programs that do, or take cars for example, or even take vehicles. You take a motorcycle, and you take a car, you take an airplane. There are very similar dynamics between these machines, even if they are not exactly the same. There are similar principles, might even be similar parts that they use. They, they use similar sources of energy and all that. They're totally different things, but because of the kind of function that they do, and because it's coming from a human mind, right? These things are built similar, so you can easily trace them and say these things came from like a similar mind, so that's why you're having features that look that similar. So I think that's the kind of explanation I would give for the genetic similarities between all life forms that are in existence.
I think that's a good argument. So, are electric cars and gas combustion engine cars the same?
In some ways they are the same, in some ways they're not. Notice
Uh-huh.
they're exactly the same.
But you're basically saying the concept at the beginning you need to get from
Yeah,
one place to the other. So,
exactly.
how are horses like cars?
Horses are not like cars.
Okay,
Okay,
that's my point.
oh, no, 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 no.
It's the same
Horses,
purpose.
no, no,
Getting
no.
from
Let me
essentially
finish.
what you're saying is
Bro.
building cars is like
No,
taming horses,
no, no. So okay, horses are not like cars in the sense
animals,
of,
and
let
you
me finish.
have to break them,
Let
but
me
the
finish my
purpose
point,
is the same.
Stanley. Let me finish my point. So,
Okay.
so the horse and the car, they have similar functions of, okay, getting from point A
Yes.
to, right? Good. So that's accepted. But the functionality of a horse or the processes of a horse is quite different. For example, the car has wheels, right? The wheels rotate, they don't jump. The horses have most animals have similar functionalities of of something jumping. If you look at most vehicles too, from the airplane to the motorbike to they all use wheels, right? So
Mhm.
it's something similar in that sense, something similar in this other sense.
But you're you kind of lost me here because horses don't have wheels.
Yeah, of course, horses don't.
Cars do, but my point is, and I think my point is, there is a huge jump between how horses work and how cars work. Other than the basic purpose, there are no similarities.
So I'm not comparing horses and cars. I was actually comparing machines with machines and comparing
Why I
biological.
know, and that's my whole point. The mode of getting from one place to the other, you can do it in a totally dissimilar
So
way.
so the central focus wasn't even what it's the getting from one place to the other. That was not the central focus of my argument, right? I was talking about mostly about functionality, how it executes whatever function is supposed to. The processes
Mhm.
and the design is similar. For the machines, it's similar. For the biological structures, it's similar. So let's take, for example, we're talking about respiration. All organisms respire, right? Let's talk about metabolism. All organisms use, ATP is usually the source of
Not all
energy.
organisms do.
Yeah,
Let's do
but
basic biology.
yeah, most
There
most
are
organisms.
anaerobic bacteria. There are
Yeah,
bacteria that use, I think, sulfur. There are
boric
different ways
acid.
of respiration,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
the
But
oxygen breathers are way, like, astronomically more
so
successful.
so I changed that. I said metabolism, right? Let's go to
Hmm.
metabolism, right? So
Anaerobic bacteria metabolize, they just do it
yep,
differently.
exactly. But they metabolize, right? And
Hmm.
in the process of metabolism, there are certain things that are similar. For example, most organisms would use ATP. Most cells
Uh-huh.
have the mitochondria, which
Hmm.
powerhouse of the cells, right?
Hmm.
Most cells will have DNA, right? Even from the most single-celled organism to complex organisms like we are, right? So
Hmm.
you see these similar structures at the molecular level or at the cellular level. You see that they are doing exactly the same thing. That's why you have features that are similar. Why you have,
Hmm.
the basic components are almost the same. So when
Okay,
you
so how does that explain the existence of God? That's the part I'm interested
so so how it explains the existence of God, I was trying to tie it to the fact that we and fishes share so much of our DNA,
in.
is just a proof that we're all made from a similar template because the biological processes are similar. So if you are a designer, you want to achieve, um, let's go back to the cars, for example. You want to move something from here to the other, right? The wheel has
Hmm.
already been invented, right? So you want variations of that vehicle. You have something efficient already. So what do you do to the bike? Just attach a wheel to it and build your structures around it, right? So there's something similar. There's a template because this they're performing similar functions. So in that sense, there's already a template for all organisms that God created, and He just tweaked things here and there to give varieties. That's
Hmm.
my argument.
Um, well, it's all going to go back to belief,
Yeah.
um, yeah, or absence of belief. But I see Templar's hair. I had no idea he was so religious. uh, Templar as a man of God, I guess the secret was Templar. You go, boy. I'm sorry, you go, Father, or Reverend.
So I
I
can
had to do. I
I can
had to do that,
see
Charles.
Fatih. I can see Fatih is she's taking us up on taking me up on my God, the existence of God and all that. So we probably would have another conversation about this. But like I said earlier, it, things of religious things are not you can't subject them to a scientific process. People who try to do that try to look for a scientific basis for religious things. I just think it's silly because they are
But
not in
see,
the same realm.
but my argument is exactly the opposite. Things happen and people want to desire or imagine a divine or a supernatural process. I mean, the belief in God is essentially outside of nature. Now, you can believe in a force outside of nature, but there's
Mhm.
some of us who just go, well, nope, nature works the way it is. And dude, Charles, I grew up Catholic.
Mhm.
Literally, like I'm a cradle Catholic. I grew up as religious as you are until maybe 16 or 17. So I understand your point of view. I'm not dismissing it. Um, to me, and you'll kick my butt, but to me, it just doesn't feel right. Um, I think that
So it
sometimes
doesn't
things
feel right.
are as they are.
It doesn't feel right. So is that a
Well, I
that's a
think
very religious
religion
that's very
feels right
religious
too.
that's a very religious thing to say. It's not scientific. If you're basing your
Well, I think
belief or
science
lack
is
of it
more on my
thereof,
side than yours.
well, yeah, and that's the reason why you should be held to a higher standards on it. Because if you're claiming science is more of your thing, then you should have a much more objective basis
But
for
see, that's
getting anything other than just saying
you.
it doesn't feel
And
right.
I think if there is a religious reason for the existence of man, religion needs to do a better job.
No, religion doesn't need to do a better job.
It honestly does.
It doesn't need it see because it's based on faith, right? So it's not it's not
Well,
based on
if if you understand that it is a faith-based argument,
hmm.
cool. Don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, of course, it's a faith-based
I just have a
argument.
little bit more data.
Well, so if you have a little bit more data, we're going to now be,
Even
you know,
if it's just a
we
tad, a
yeah,
drop more.
fine. That's fine. But you know that the scientific process is
And you
rigorous.
are the data guy.
Of course, of course. So I'm able to separate my, you know, I'm able to
You know
separate
what?
my
I
secular self
appreciate your faith.
from
I'm
my
not gonna.
religious self.
I'm strictly honest here. We've known each other for a couple years.
Yep.
I admire your faith. Stepping outside of a logical argument and having faith in it, I don't have a problem with it.
Hmm.
I admire it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So how did we get here? We got here from
It was something about
Shatterman and
it was
Stonehenge.
something about green-eyed black people building Stonehenge. And
You
quite
didn't.
frankly, if you look up the history of Stonehenge, because I did, there
Mm,
were two phases roughly 2,500 years apart.
mm,
So, but it's a children's book. Um, let the children until they get to, reality. I mean, kindergarten books are, they believe in Mother Goose too.
true, true.
What if I wrote a book that said Mother Goose built Stonehenge? Would you have the same problems? A goose built Stonehenge.
I would think you are obviously, you're obviously being, you're doing it for, well, you're obviously being fictional about it. So yeah, but some people
Well,
don't take
she
the,
could. Now, I'm sure she's serious, but
yeah.
to a certain extent, I understand your point of view because you're looking at Kendi the same way, but Kendi's a little bit more serious, at least in his first book. Where he goes off track is the anti-racist baby
Mm.
stuff, which I think is pissing in the wind, to be blunt about it. Um, but you know why I think he's peeing in the wind. Um, and I won't, you know, it's a different conversation.
Talking about Kendi, I heard he's in some sort of trouble with finances, financial
Well,
management and
he's
all
he's not. His center is, and it is a bit of a disappointment. But his center at Boston University, it was like some big to do. Maybe it's even like 3 4 years ago. He had an anti-racist research center at American University in D.C. and Boston University kind of invited him up to open a center. I think it was Boston. I'm pretty sure it's Boston University. Now the
that.
deal is his wife is like some big time doctor. Like she's like a heavyweight in the
Mm.
medical field. So it was probably I'm speculating, but um, and again, this will be a conversation um offline. But someone said on YouTube the other day, and I kind of chuckled. It's shocking but not surprising.
So, I mean by it's shocking but not surprising. Was it like you were expecting it or what? Do you think
No,
this was going to
it,
happen?
it's it's shocking, but you've had people like Lowry and all these black people, and I'm not saying they derailed his career, but I do think that um, Kendi. I don't think Kendi is a very good. It, you won't believe this, but in a way, Kendi reminds me of Thomas Sowell.
Hmm.
He's gonna wind up at a think tank, and it might be a liberal think tank, and he's gonna be just fine, even if his project, fails.
Hmm.
Um, I they're probably kind of the same species of person.
Hmm.
They are just they're not public people. They need time in their office with a bunch of books. And quite frankly, I'm kind of the same way. Someone once told me, you know what, if I put you, and this was a boss of mine, I know if I put you in a quiet room with a bunch of books, you're gonna think great thoughts and probably come up with something that is successful. It's just we don't have time to do it. We live in the real world. And you know what? Um, my boss was right. Um, Kendi's not done, and I think he just reminds me of Soul in a lot of ways.
So there was a critique of Thomas Sowell that was shared in the Discord server today. I'll forward it to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. Some really interesting points were raised, and
Okay.
Yeah. After
Because
the show, I saw it.
I'm Soul is a great man. He's just not. Um, there are some things, he's. As a matter of fact, Soul. If he, I think you're gonna love this, and this won't surprise you. I'm not sure it'll shock you. Soul's biggest problem is the people who think Soul is a great man. Um, Sometimes your fanboys are your worst cheerleaders.
How do you mean? In Saul's
I
case?
think I think people like Jason Riley. I'm like, holy cow! Um, Jason Riley, you know, worshiping. What the heck has Jason Riley done other than I? You know what? Again, it's another conversation. But
But how does that detract from Saul's work if Jason Riley for
well,
any of his videos?
there's a there's a I think it was um, I think it was George Washington. Sometimes you judge a man by the company he keeps.
Is it is Saul seeking out such company?
Well, no, 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 no. And I'm kind of being hyperbolic here, but um, the type of people that soul tends to attract tend to be of a type. In SKC says he likes Jason Riley. SKC is Jason Riley. I'm betting. And again, I would just drivel on about. I think that I think Soul left alone would be perfectly fine and probably fairly wise. But um, you know, dude just gave an interview and he's 93, and they probably had to convince him to do it. He was probably perfectly fine, you
Mm,
know, with his books. And I can kind of understand that. I think people like Jason Riley are just Jason Riley's a child. I'm not a Riley fan. Lowry you have to respect. Um, Stanley Crouch, huge respect. I discovered Stanley Crouch way before. I just bought a book by Stanley Crouch and he made me laugh. Now, he was way more conservative than, even, I think I was maybe 13 or 14, but Crouch was funny and erudite about jazz. And have never been totally knowledgeable about jazz, but that Stanley Crouch influenced Lowry. They were friends. I
mm,
kind of see some of Lowry's bravado these days, where he goes off on his rants. He's trying to do a Stanley Crouch imitation, quite frankly. Um,
really?
oh, I think so, but that's my personal opinion. Um, so
So what about
anyway,
what
I've
about
been rambling
what
on.
about Crouch is taking on?
What about Crouch? What? Sorry.
What about Crouch is Lowry taking on? What aspects of Crouch is
Oh,
Lowry
the
taking on?
rant part, the righteous anger, um, the eruditeness, the pretending to. Crouch knew black culture, and I think Lowry does too. But I don't think he. knows black culture as well as Stanley Crouch did. Um,
So
and
what exactly do you mean by black culture? You know, when you say,
well, I think the crux of black culture is in the South of the United States. Who is the Clue Channel? There is no such thing as black, Stanley. Well, in America, there is. Just look at the census form. They will ask you to check a box. It is black, non Hispanic. So, uh, what can I say? Clue, get a clue.
but what is black culture?
It is basically, uh, in my imagining, let's narrow it down to American descendants of slavery.
Hmm.
So we're being very specific about my black culture. It is people or the descendants of people who have literally been here longer than the Mayflower.
Yeah, that's
And it's
basically.
provable. 1619 was a year before the Mayflower. And if you think about, the Spanish being in the continental or the lower 48, um, black people have been here since like the 15, can't remember the exact year, but the 1500s. So, um, what I'm saying is ADOS culture, which is black culture, mostly, is a culture that has learned to adapt through a bunch of um, hard times. We'll just call it that. And how to deal with hard times, the philosophy or the attitude of how to deal with hard times, knowing when to snap back, knowing when not to snap back. It's still in black culture. Um, it is a culture that is very American centered and American produced. It was forged in America.
Mm.
And
Uh,
again, we can, there are many, branches to go from here. But in my opinion, ADOS culture is different, as distinct in the African diaspora as Caribbean culture is for blacks from the Caribbean. There's a Mexican, African descended population. It's different. Same thing with Central America. Same thing with Brazil. Same thing with Haiti. We are all culturally different, but there are some ways. There are some commonalities. A lot of it is deep culture, like the way we cook, the way we exist in a Western culture. There are commonalities, but some of the specifics are way different. I think someone growing up in, say, um, well, I don't know, can't think of a good example,
So
but
some of the, like SKC is saying, he said black culture equals to dysfunction, right? So when
and I
people
would, you
hear,
know what, I won't even take that up. I think SKC, and he is, I love SKC. I think he often makes good points, but that's not one of them.
mm, because it,
Ha,
it seems it
black
seems
culture being dysfunctional? Um, how so?
so I'm not saying it is. Let me
Well,
drive to my
SKC
point.
is.
So my point is, most of the time when the black culture comes up, conversation around black culture, is usually revolves around some very sort of negative things like
Yes.
violence, like crime, like
Oh,
all
that's
that,
excellent.
all that. So why is it the case that black culture is so easily associated with those things? What's going on there?
Well, some of it is based in data. You know the stats as well as I do, and certainly SKC does because he wears them on his black sleeve. So, um, however, uh, the funny thing about statistics is there's a lot of interpretation that goes. I'm just going to go, well, in America, um, black people um, are associated with poverty and all that stuff. But you know what? I think it's still uh, below a poverty line. Um, Black people are about roughly as successful, if you really want to deal with statistics, as any other population. Most people aren't black. I'm sorry, most black people aren't poor, is my point.
Mm, that's interesting.
Now, it's a smaller, well, that's true. There's no doubt about that. Look
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
but the
but
other thing I want
that
to say,
reality,
I'm sorry,
that
go ahead.
reality that yeah, that reality that most black people aren't poor is is in stark contrast with the claims that black people are you know when I say oppressed, oppressed might not be the word, like, oh, they have it worse in America and all that. If most black people aren't poor,
Well, when you say worse in America compared to what?
okay, compared to white people.
Well, is that not true? And again, it depends on the metric you're looking at. Um,
Mm.
if you're gonna say, and it's obvious, black people as a group are not as well off as white people are.
But people aren't groups. People are people, right? It's just
Okay,
like the
let's
um,
not do that. You asked about black people in
okay,
America.
okay, okay, okay. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
Um, is Are black people as well off monetarily?
Probably not.
Okay, well then, how is that a falsehood?
Well, you have to prove that them not being well
Well,
off
I don't have to prove it. You can
is
Google it.
due to oppression or what have you. There can be all
I
sorts of
think,
reasons
I
why people
think,
are worse
but
off.
when you say oppression, I mean historical oppression. ADOS specifically, American descendants of slavery, are not as well off as your average white person because we have several hundred years of not having the means of generating generational wealth. How is that not true?
Okay, so let's say for the purpose of this conversation, that's true, right?
Well, it
Um,
is true.
okay, so it is true, right?
It's easily provable.
Is that oppression or what have you, whatever was causing those historical
Okay.
issues that were causing those things, do they still persist today, or
Okay.
they've seen?
Well, no, they don't persist today, not directly, but
Okay.
they are systemic. And let me ask you a question. Technically, Jim Crow ended in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 65. So
Mm-hmm.
we're talking 59 years. Is
Mm.
59 years enough time for Black people to grow wealth, generational wealth? Is that
No,
enough
in
time?
my opinion, no. But
Okay, well, that's my whole
so
point. We're not
no,
suffering.
no.
I personally, I'm not saying we're oppressed, but I'm also saying we are not. Um, we are.
Yeah, but the point, Stanley, is we both agree on the fact that historical oppression is one of the reasons why.
It, but do you agree?
Sorry, let
Well,
me just
you
finish my point.
asked, is the
Let me finish my
problem
point.
still present? I'm
So
saying
my
history
point
has
is,
consequences.
yeah, history has consequences. Black people were not able to build the generational wealth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We know all that, right? Um, this the time frame between when the legal oppression stopped and now it's not such a long time. So you would still expect that there will still be some struggles, right? But the framing of it is as if, right, that these problems are problems of today. It's not framed like, okay, we have a long way to go based on our history, but we're going to get somewhere. It's framed like, oh, the problem is intractable. The problem is now. The problem has been
I
in the
don't.
past, and the problem is going into the future.
Such a good question. The problem isn't intractable. The problem is basically reinforced. It doesn't. Well, I guess a better answer is it doesn't have to be intractable. So that's my answer. It doesn't have to be intractable.
So is it intractable in your opinion?
It's not intractable. However, to go back to, and I'm gonna have to try again to get Irony on your show. Um, it's not black people that are the problem.
Who's the problem?
Black people are not making this problem intractable.
So who is making the problem intractable?
White people.
How?
We need better white people.
How?
Well, let me start. um, we can go with white. Well, you know what? Let's go for a low hanging fruit and one that I often go to. America, the voters, and I'm gonna go racelessness here.
Mm.
America tolerates racists in office, starting with Trump, and there's not been a non-racist as a president in.
So how has Trump's racism
Dude, let's
negatively
start.
affected black people?
I can. You're kidding. How is Trump a racist? Is that what you
No, no,
said?
no. I said, how has his quote and unquote racism affected black people negatively?
Well, it's more a historical point.
But Trump doesn't live in history. Trump lives now.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. My whole point was that it's a perpetual problem. It's not intractable. It can be fixed. It needs people who want to fix it.
You don't need if
And
okay,
60% of the American population is not black. If the problem, if if
but
60% or
it's-
larger of the
that's
population
Stanley.
said,
Stanley,
dude,
you're assuming this the people who have been voted into offices are doing something
yes,
better for
and
white
I'm going to
people
stick with that
than
argument.
no, no,
America
you're assuming
tolerates,
no. I
dude.
see. You see, I couldn't care if someone is racist, right?
Well,
I
you
care.
don't have to
More.
care.
I care more about what they're able to do with
You
their
don't
people.
have to care one way or the other.
Yeah, of course, I don't have to care one way or the other, but putting myself in that sort of situation,
Well, it's kind of
I
hard to
would.
do.
It's not kind of hard to do, right? It's not hard to do. But let me make my point. My point is, you're saying that 60% of the voters are white people. They are the ones picking these leaders. Are these leaders doing something any more than
60% of the American population is
American
white
population?
people. There's a
Yes.
difference.
So these leaders they are picking, are they doing things any more better
Okay,
for white people than they are for black
you
people?
need an example. Um, Trump, and
Mm,
there are many other examples. Back in, I think it was the early 80s or maybe late 70s, Trump literally, Donald Trump, and I think
mm,
his father might have been in there too, what lost a lawsuit in New York City, um,
mm.
being a racist landlord.
So I was talking more
Now,
for
please
Trump's
let me
4 years in
finish.
office.
So he has a history of racism. Do you think he's reformed now?
I don't care. I
Okay,
care about
well,
what he does.
black people who live in America have to care. You don't have to. We
Yeah,
do.
SKC lives in America.
SKC, you know
He
what?
doesn't care.
SKC wouldn't care if the Klan burned a cross on his front lawn. He would roast marshmallows on that cross. He would make s'mores.
So so so
I
the
don't
point,
care what SKC has to say.
you don't have to care. He's black anyway, so you
All
can't
I have to
invalidate
say, my whole
invalidate.
point, one of my main points, was America tolerates people with racist pasts.
So Stanley, I'm
Well,
more
well, hold on.
I'm more interested in actions, right?
Dude, we elected someone who lost lawsuits and have several other instances of
How
anti-black
did
racism. He
how did
was
he harm
voted
black
into. No,
black people during
Trump
his
is a racist. He
how did
has
he
lost
harm black
lawsuits.
Stanley?
Period.
How did
Okay,
he harm black people during his 4 years in office?
okay. Trump, my contention is America is okay with racists and we vote them into office. Tell me how I'm wrong.
You haven't proven that Trump's
No,
presidency
I
harmed
proved
black
it.
people.
You can go back to the New York Times articles.
How did
Dude,
Trump's presidency
Trump
harm black people?
was a racist with the
And
Central Park Five.
this is me who has no love for Trump anymore. But tell me
That's not my
Trump
point.
how
Love him or
Trump's
leave him.
how did
Uh,
he harm people during his 4 years in office? That's
I'm
what I
sorry,
need to.
what?
How did he harm black people during his 4 years in office?
He didn't have the black vote.
How did he harm? I was talking about harm. What harm? What damage did he do to black people
Okay,
while he
well,
was?
you know what? Um, that's actually not my point. Racists don't have to harm black people. Do you actually think that racism has to be fatal?
Fatal is a that's an extreme word, right?
Okay, I'm asking you a question now.
So
You can be a
so
racist and
Stanley.
never hurt anyone.
So if
Is
it's
that
a
true?
yeah, it's true, and
Okay, then what? Okay, he's a racist. Black people weren't harmed by electing a racist.
so do you want to tell me that
So is it
the
okay to
racist?
have
Do
a
you want
racist in office if he does no harm?
so what's the difference between Trump and the KKK?
Well, his father dabbled with it, but
What's the
th-
difference between Trump and the KKK?
dude,
They are to you they are both obviously racist. What's the
well,
difference?
yeah, they're racist, but my point, and maybe I'm just making a very, you're making a very data based argument. Like
Nope.
if they don't burn across in my yard, racists
I'm
aren't
I'm
hurting me.
saying I'm saying I'm
I think
saying
there is a spirit to America to make a quasi religious argument. Having racists in office is basically a cultural, spiritual, aesthetic problem.
I don't see the problem with the problem.
You don't have to see it. A lot of Black Americans do.
And a lot
Dude, I'm
don't
not.
either.
I'm not an isolated like dude
A
out on
lot
the fringe.
a lot don't either.
But you know what? Most Black Americans see Trump as a racist.
How do you know?
Shit, look at his percentage of the Black vote.
Which
It's
increased?
it's SKC in a
His
bunch
percentage
of
of black his
it's
percentage of black male
SKC
vote.
it's SKC and a bunch of his soul
Oh,
brothers.
Stanley. His percentage of black male votes actually increased in 2020.
um, dude, do the majority of Black voters vote Republican? Yes
They
or
don't,
no?
and it's not a problem of
Okay,
Trump.
then that's my point. That's
So
my
it's not a
point.
problem. So it's
That's
not a
my
Trump.
point.
So
Dude,
okay, so Stanley,
you are gonna quibble
Stanley,
over a couple percentage points?
Stanley. So if the natural quote and unquote state of blacks in America is not to vote Republican, and that which is not a Trump problem. And then you have a Republican candidate like Trump comes in and even is trending a little bit higher, as in is growing the Republican appeal amongst black voters. Then I think
Mhm.
there's something there to say about the man.
And
And
I would tend to disagree with you.
I don't think black people will look
I
to feel
don't think
racist
I don't
and
think
say they
that
want
a
to
few
support him.
more I don't think that a few more Black people voting for Trump is a trend. And let me give you a good example, and I don't have the article in front of me, but I bet SKC does. When Trump got his mugshot taken, if you went, I think it was to whatever Twitter is now, X, there were Black people like SKC who were saying, "Oh, you know what? Trump is my N word. He got a mugshot just like me." It
That
was
was not
it was
the
well, hold on, let
SKC's.
me finish. It was Black people being just like, oh, I bet a bunch of Black people with mugshots are gonna vote for Trump now. It was a ridiculous argument. And the Black people who were persuaded by that, they definitely need to vote for Trump. I'll take them to the I'll take them to the polling place.
Yeah, so in that regard, I don't
Did you
actually
see the story about
I don't have a disagreement.
now now that
I made a
now
show
that
about it.
Trump has a mugshot,
I-
he's just like
So
like
so Stanley, I even made a show about that, and I thought it was insulting to black people to say that black people Trump's appeal with black people has gone up because he has a mugshot. Because
but let me
the
ask you a question. You don't think that's racist?
of course it's racist.
Okay, I will stop there.
So
We don't have to talk about systemic racism anymore because a presidential candidate
this is
is no,
Stanley.
hold on.
Listen,
Tell me now,
no. Let me
tell me
finish my point.
systemic racism doesn't exist.
Let me finish my point, right?
Dude, black
The point
people,
is
there are people
Stanley.
who think black people are going to vote for Trump because he has a mugshot, because he's been
Yeah,
in a jail. How
yeah.
racist is that?
Of course, that's racist, and I
It's
called it out, right?
systemic, dude. It's
I, I
cultural.
I called it out.
Cultural is systemic.
So, Stanley, anybody
Yes.
can be what they want to be as long as they're not harming any other person. That's my philosophy. If you want to be racist, knock
And
yourself out. As soon
you
as
are
you
so right.
lie to hurting someone else, that's when we have a problem, right?
And you
So,
know what? So a presidential candidate can be who he wants to be.
well, if the people vote for him, why not?
And most black people don't vote for Trump. Have you
Most black,
noticed?
most black people don't vote Republicans. So it's not a function of Trump. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
Trump.
yeah. Love that. Love
Trump
that.
wasn't the one who broke the black vote and made all the black people run away from the Republican Party.
You
It
know
wasn't
what?
Trump.
That is so right. Let's focus on specifics because it you can ignore huge swaths of cultural trends. There is an Oprah who is a billionaire, and I think it was it Dave Chappelle who said if Elon Musk woke up with Oprah's money, he'd like jump out a window.
Who said that?
I think it was Dave Chappelle, maybe not, but my point is, and that's my whole point about yeah, there's some black billionaires, but no one comparable to an Elon Musk.
After a couple of $1 million, what does it matter anymore? Right?
You have a point, and that's essentially like a very American black conservative point. But there's some of us who care beyond. Um, it's a very individualistic point. Black conservatives tend to be very libertarian to an extent. They care about themselves and their families. American black culture, at least ADOS culture specifically, um, it was a group effort to last this long and thrive.
Hello? Stanley, you there? Okay. I can't hear Stanley. Can you guys hear him? Hello, Stanley? Put him back. Stanley, you there? Anyhow, this has been a fruitful 1 hour 30 minutes conversation, which we started with. Hey Zachary, how you doing? We started with talking about the ridiculous idea that black people built Stonehenge in Britain, right? Crazy stuff. When people try to overcorrect, you want to make corrections for certain things, and then you just overcorrect in a direction that's it's obviously ridiculous. And then we moved on from no, I think before then I talked about the two cringy Indians in American politics, Kamala Harris and Vivek Ramaswamy. Right? Kamala Harris saying the reason why young people are choosing not to have kids today is because climate change. They're concerned about climate change. But that's that's not it. A lot of young people are concerned about the economy, a worsening economy. They can barely even take care of themselves financially, not to think of having a family, right? I think that's a problem. That's a bigger problem than quote unquote climate change. And then Vivek, who some people have called Chat GPT, who just says a lot of ridiculous stuff, wanting to have people take a citizenship test before they can vote, and then finding out that even his father, right? Even his father was his father is not even American. He's not an American citizen. I think up to this point, and his mother was not an American citizen when he was born. So isn't he basically illegal? Hmm? Isn't he? Well, Zachariah, you want to call in? Well, I won't be able to do that anymore because I will have to end the stream shortly. Um, I have to end the stream shortly. So, guys, welcome to the conversation. Like, share, subscribe, support on Patreon or support on Super Chats or my book. Get my crime fiction book. You'll find the description in the you find the description in the find the links in the description of this video. Okay, Stanley is back, so just a few minutes for Stanley to wrap up his thoughts and then we're done. So Stanley, yeah,
Hey,
I was
sorry
about
about
to end the stream. Yeah, so let's wrap up within the next say 2 minutes. So complete your thoughts.
I pretty much said them all, but I think the I think the argument that SKC and black conservatives make are very unnuanced, and it's kind of funny because when they talk about other subjects like um, I don't know, identity politics, they want to say um, everyone else is unnuanced. Um, and I understand why. Um, so we go. I just don't think they're right. And a lot of times they're provably wrong. While I love SKC, sometimes I think he lives in a different country. I, I have no idea where he's coming from. So,
So for me, I think conservatives could do with mm, a little bit more nuance, right? I think they could do with more nuance in addressing race
well, the
relations,
funny thing
but
is they should start with Soul. Soul is the king of blunt force logic.
blunt force logic is not bad if it's used accurately. If your facts
No,
are correct, if
blunt
they are
force
the
logic
right.
is okay if it's useful. Again, nuance. When Soul talks about American slavery, his response is everyone had slavery without actually reading the U.S. Constitution and a bunch of
Okay, I get
American
the point.
history. I I tend to be shocked that someone supposedly as smart as Soul can't figure out the difference. And my conclusion is, he is a grifter.
Mm, that's a
I,
strong one.
you know what? Um, go, dude. He's an honest grifter. He's talented, but you know what? He didn't like teaching anymore, and that, in my opinion, is his cardinal sin. He had a chance over several universities teaching a generation of black students back in the late 60s, 68, 69, and he fled because he couldn't deal. Dude, someone with his talent, he should have stayed the course. He'd be a lot more influential. He lost his chance, and a bunch of people, like Lowry, going, "Oh, hey, he's great, dude." He lost his chance to be great. He could have actually. I honestly think Soul could have been in the league with a black leader. My theory, and he decided to take photos.
Right. So I think this would be a good place to draw this conversation to a close. Stanley, thanks for your thoughts as always. Thanks everyone that came around. Templar, Cool Kumasi, the Clue Channel, SKC, Deacon Dave, Lord Serb, Zachariah, everyone who came. So I'll catch you guys soon in another live stream, and it's bye for now.